It's time to break down the Buffalo Bills Week 7 opponent, the challenges they present, and what the Bills need to do to deal with them today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, folks, you know what we're doing. Getting ready for the upcoming Bills game. We'll talk about the keys to victory. We'll talk about the matchups. But let's start by getting into the nuts and bolts, talking about this head coach and this quarterback. So the Buffalo Bills back home after 3 road games in a row at Houston, at Baltimore, at the Jets. They're back home in Week 7 to host the Tennessee Titans. The game will be played on Sunday, October 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time at Highmark Stadium in Orchard Park, New York. The game will be broadcasted on CBS. Andrew Catalon is on the play-by-play. Tiki Barber and Jason McCourty are the game analysts, with A.J. Ross as your sideline reporter. This will be the 51st all-time meeting between the Bills and the Titans, and I guess the Titans/Oilers. The Bills are 20-30 all-time against the Titans. Sean McDermott is 3-2 against the Tennessee Titans. The last meeting was in September of 2022. The Bills won 41-7. The Bills enter this game 4-2. The Titans are 1-4. Let's look at the schedule so far for the Titans. In Week 1, they lost to the Bears 24-17. They lost to the Jets in Week 2, 24-17. They lost to the Packers in Week 3, 30-14. Beat the Dolphins in Week 4, 31-12. Had a bye week in Week 5. Out of their bye, they lost to the Colts last week, 20-17. Head coach of the Tennessee Titans is Brian Callahan. He's 40 years old. It's his first season as an NFL head coach. He replaced Mike Vrabel, who the Titans dismissed last year. And Brian Callahan is the son of Bill Callahan, former NFL head coach, and regarded as one of the best offensive line coaches really in this era of football. And actually, Bill Callahan is the offensive line coach for the Titans. And prior to becoming the head coach of the Titans, Brian Callahan was the Bengals offensive coordinator from 2019 through 2023. He was there with Zach Taylor. The quarterback for the Tennessee Titans is Will Levis, 25 years old, second-round pick, number 33 overall out of Kentucky by the Titans in 2023. So this is his second season. 6'4", 229 pounds. Got 9 starts as a rookie last year, 5 so far this year. So 14 career starts. And in those starts, the Titans are 4-10. Let's talk about his production this year. And folks, it's not good. This is bottom tier quarterback production. He's completing 66% of his passes, 140 passing yards per game, 5 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions, passer rating of 70.7. His advanced metrics, let's look at those. Minus 0.42 EPA, expected points added per dropback, dead last in the NFL. 0.42, minus 0.42. Deshaun Watson is 31, and he's at 0.29. I mean, that's a commanding lead in terms of EPA. 11.2% of his throws are deep, which means 20 yards or more down the field. That's 10th highest in terms of frequency in the NFL. On his deep throws this year, he's completed 3 of 14 passes for 69 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. 46% of his yards come after the catch, which is 26th in the NFL. So not a ton of yards after catch production in this offense. He goes to his first read 68% of the time. That's 15th. His average time to throw is 2.53, which is 12th. His catchable ball percentage is 76%, which is 17th. His off-target throw percentage is 18.4%, which is 22nd. His turnover-worthy throw percentage is incredibly high. 8% of his throws are turnover-worthy, which is 31st in the league. Drops haven't been too much of an issue. 4.8% drop rate. That's 22nd. He's pressured on 34% of his dropbacks. That's the 11th highest of any quarterback in the NFL. And I'm surprised that 29% of the pressure he faces turns into a sack. That's 3rd highest in the NFL. He's a pretty athletic guy, and he's not really making anybody miss in the pocket. And in fact, under pressure, Will Levis is last in the NFL in EPA per dropback under pressure. They run play action 25% of the time. That's 12th highest in the NFL. He's 23rd in EPA per dropback with play action. And he is a threat to run the ball, although he only has 16 carries for 106 yards so far this year. So just some general thoughts on Will Levis. He's built like an action figure. He's got a terrific frame. Extremely athletic. Big-time arm in terms of the ability to generate velocity on the football. Just very underdeveloped as a quarterback. Not a very strong processor or decision maker, making some of the most mind-numbing decisions you'll ever see with the football, especially when he's under pressure, whether it's, literally just throwing the ball to the other team, fumbling. Really, it just gets very goofy. Doesn't really have much in the way of accuracy. So he's got size, athleticism, and arm talent, but just mentally not very strong, accuracy not very strong. And I think he's in a terrible system for his skill set. Brian Callahan is a West Coast offense, right? Timing, hit your back foot, get the ball out, read the defense, that type of stuff. Will Levis is not that, right? Will Levis is more of a player that is going to be able to resolve to his physical gifts to make plays off schedule. And I think you want to use him in a lot of different ways than what Brian Callahan is asking him to do. So it's an interesting situation. Obviously, it's not going well. This is the worst passing offense in the NFL. Metrically, for him to be worse than Deshaun Watson is pretty alarming. Now, there's been some flashes, but there's zero consistency whatsoever. So the Bills, that's who they get this week. Obviously, you want to make sure that this isn't the week where he wakes up, because what's interesting about Will Levis is it's not like he doesn't have talent around him. He's got good skill players. And so we'll break down those players and more here on the other side of it and what the keys are for the Bills defense against this offense. So be sure to stick with me. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Josh Allen rookie card just isn't in the cards. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Arena Club is the only repack that provides a real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your polls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent with a full grade rationale provided, an explanation of how your card was scored. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting platform that you got to check out. So right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for 10% off your first purchase. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is also the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy, so that way your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LockedOnNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDON on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, the offensive coordinator for the Titans is Nick Holes. He's 40 years old, was a longtime offensive assistant with the Raiders, 2012 through 2021. Then he went to UNLV to be the offensive coordinator in 2022, was the Jaguars passing game coordinator last year, and now he's the Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator. But Brian Callahan is your play caller. Let's talk about the numbers here. They're 21st in scoring, 19.2 points per game. They run the ball 46% of the time. They pass at 54%. So 19th in pass frequency. 30th in EPA per play on offense. 32nd in EPA per pass. 14th in EPA per rush. And their run blocking metrics are very poor. Only 1.07 yards before contact per run. That's dead last in the NFL. The Jets were dead last in the NFL. Then after this past week, the Jets went to 31 and the Titans went to 32. They get a conversion on third down only 29% of the time. That's 30th in the league. They score touchdowns in the red zone 62% of the time, which is 12th best. Let's talk about this personnel. And this is where things get interesting because you feel like they've got enough here for them to be a decent offense. And so I think you can kind of isolate the variable and realize that the problem is Will Levis. Wide receivers, veteran trio, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd. Those are household NFL wide receivers. You know, DeAndre Hopkins, not a speed guy, but a route technician, really good hands, ball skills, body control. Calvin Ridley is a dynamic route runner that has some verticality to his game. And then Tyler Boyd's been one of the better slot receivers in the game for a long time, who obviously Brian Callahan knows well from their time together in Cincinnati. So far through 5 games, Hopkins has 175 yards, Ridley 141, and Boyd 127. So you can just see there's just not a whole lot of production when it comes to this passing offense. Their tight ends, they'll play 3 of them. Their most dynamic player is Chig Okonkwo, very athletic, very talented with the ball in his hands. He hasn't been very productive this year, but he's a potent player. They'll also play Josh Wiley, young player out of Cincinnati, who I think can be a good depth tight end in the NFL. And they'll also play Nick Vanette, who's a veteran in the league, a replacement level player, but he does get some run in this offense. Probably the best blocker of the 3. The running back, Tony Pollard, was with the Dallas Cowboys. Good player. He's got 339 yards rushing this year on 5 games, 339 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4.3 yards per carry. And remember, they're not getting much in the way of yards before contact. So Pollard's really grinding out some tough yards for this team. He's a good running back. And Tyjae Spears is his running mate, but we'll see what he can do. I mean, I think he's got some injury stuff right now. He might not be available for this game. So Tony Pollard probably going to be heavily featured on Sunday. When it comes to their order of weapons in the passing game, when you sort it by targets, Ridley's their most targeted receiver. He's 24 targets. Hopkins has 20. Boyd has 20. Pollard 18. And Chig Okonkwo, the tight end, has 13. So that's kind of their top 5 in terms of the pecking order for targets. Let's talk about this offensive line. A lot of young players here. Their left tackle is J.C. Latham. Was their first-round pick, a top 10 pick out of Alabama. A big physical blocker, not necessarily a very quick or speedy guy with foot quickness, but has length and power. So off to a pretty decent start this year. Their left guard is Peter Skoronski, their first-round pick last year. So they've been investing pretty heavily in the draft with their top picks in this offensive line. Skoronski is a pretty solid player. Played tackle at Northwestern, kick inside to guard in the NFL. I think he'll be a pretty good starter for them for a while. At center, it's Lloyd Cushenberry. They gave him a pretty healthy free agent contract to come over from the Denver Broncos. I think he's a good starting center in the NFL. Their right guard is Dylan Raduns. They picked him in the second round a few years back, has played a little right tackle, a little bit of right guard. Probably better as a utility blocker than a starter, but he's their guy at right guard. And then the right tackle is Nicolas Petit-Frere. He is a replacement level player. He struggles a lot, and this is the weak link of this offensive line. I mean, obviously, I think you can look at both of these tackles as young players that are pretty unproven, but Petit-Frere has just really had a hard go so far this year. And so you got to be thinking that the Bills should have some good opportunities to take advantage of that right side of this Tennessee offensive line between Ray Dunes and Petit-Frere. So what are my keys for the Bills on defense against this Tennessee offense that respectfully is struggling? Number one is you can't let them find any momentum. You know, this is obviously an interesting situation where you've got veteran receivers, veteran running back, and the production's not there. I think you probably saw the soundbite that came out after the Colts loss last week from Calvin Ridley. Use some expletives to discuss some frustrations with, not getting targets earlier in the game. I think he was targeted 8 or 9 times against the Colts and didn't have any catches. And so, I think they're probably going to look to correct that a little bit. And like I said, Hopkins, Ridley, and Boyd, I mean, those are good receivers in the NFL. And so you just kind of wonder, when is it going to click? When is it going to click? It can't be this week, right? This cannot be the week that this Titans offense has a pulse, especially this passing game. So I would be aggressive. I would play tight coverage and make sure that these receivers don't get going and this passing game doesn't get going. Number 2 is remember that Will Levis can run. He's a very athletic guy and he's an aggressive runner. I mean, if you watch him run, it almost reminds me of like George Kittle with the ball in his hands, just big, will run over people, challenge you with physicality, do some reckless things. And so you gotta be ready for that. And we're talking about a pretty desperate operation here. It's sitting at 1-4. The metrics are very poor. You could see Will Levis wanting to try to do a lot here and really be aggressive to make some plays. And I think that's kind of just in his DNA to begin with. And so I think you got to be ready for that. You got to be ready for a physical running quarterback. You don't see many of these, right? Josh Allen certainly is that, but the Bills don't play against Josh Allen. Thank God. I wouldn't love doing that. So this is look, I know the numbers are bad with Will Levis, but it would not surprise me to see the quarterback run game be a bit of a thing for them in this game. And then number 3 is you got to get ready to defend the run. I mean, that's the best thing that this offense does. They've got a pulse running the ball. They don't have a pulse passing it. Pollard's had a good season. They got a good offensive line coach. You could see pretty much any team that's going to play the Bills, hey, look, we're going to run the ball, take advantage of the light boxes that they give us. If we can run it and be successful, that'll keep Josh Allen off the field. You know the deal. And surely the Titans are probably looking at, what's the script for them to win the game? And I'm sure it's a heavy dose of Tony Pollard and pounding the rock. And so, I'd be willing to really be pretty attentive to defending the run and inviting them to throw. Say, yeah, okay, Will Levis, come beat us through the air and live with some of the one-on-one battles that might be a result of that. So be mindful that this team can run the ball, and it's probably going to be a big part of what they believe their formula to win the game is. So don't let them have any momentum, right? Keep a bad offense bad. Be mindful of the dual threat nature of Will Levis, in particular, the physical runner that he can be, and get ready to defend Tony Pollard because he's going to be heavily featured, I'm sure of it, in this game. All right, folks, on the other side of it, we'll talk about this Titans defense that is actually pretty strong in terms of the metrics this year. In fact, number 1 in total defense. We'll break it down for you, tell you what the Bills need to do to move the ball and score points against this Titans defense. Be sure to stick with me. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I love looking through FanDuel and seeing all the lines, the over-unders, the player props. And one line that I absolutely love this week is the Detroit Lions. They are road underdogs against the Minnesota Vikings, and I think they will win that game outright. I've got some real action on the Lions money line this week. I think Jared Goff is in that Lions offense is so good against the blitz, and we know Brian Flores is going to send it. And let's be honest, Sam Darnold has regressed into being Sam Darnold over the last game and a half. I like a hot Lions team getting this Vikings team off the bye. So get in on that action and plenty more over at FanDuel. And don't forget, they got a great deal here for you. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Check it out, folks. That's FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks, Bills offense against the Titans defense. That's what we're focused on right here. The Titans defense is coordinated by Denard Wilson, 42 years old. He was part of that Ravens staff last year. All these coaches got plucked off the Ravens. Anthony Weaver went to be the Dolphins defensive coordinator. Denard Wilson's now the Titans defensive coordinator. Zach Orr promoted from within to the Ravens. And then Mike McDonald, the head coach of Seattle Seahawks, was the defensive coordinator for the Ravens last year. So this coaching tree here has been spread out throughout the league, and the Bills are getting a pretty healthy dose of it. They've already played the Dolphins. They've already played the Ravens. They get the Titans this week, and next week they get Seattle. So they're going to play all these defensive coaches. And Wilson was the DB's coach last year, was the DB's coach with the Eagles 2021 to 2022, and then the Jets defensive backs coached 17 to 20. So longtime DB coach in the NFL, now a defensive coordinator. Let's talk about the metrics for this defense. They're giving up 22 points per game. That's 13th in the NFL. Like I said, the fewest yards in the NFL. So if you care about total defense and the volume of yards, they've given up the fewest of any team in the NFL. I care a lot more about efficiency numbers, like EPA, expected points added, which is what EPA does is it takes every situation that's ever happened, and it says what's the normal result here. And then whatever the team does or the player does, the deviation, good or bad, is what you get in terms of expected points added. It's a great metric, very pure metric. So they're 4th in EPA per play defensively, very good. 7th in EPA per pass, 3rd in EPA per rush. So very strong metrics here in terms of efficiency metrics on total defense, defending the run, defending the pass. Good on third downs, 32%. That's all. 32% conversion rate on third down. That's 5th best in the league. They only allow a touchdown 40% of the time when teams get to the red zone. So that's 4th best in the NFL. So very good metrics here. Now, I think it's fair to point out the opponents. You know, I think these metrics are a bit skewed based on a really soft slate of offenses. You know, they get Caleb Williams in his first start. They get the Jets in week 2 with Aaron Rodgers. They get the Packers with Malik Willis. The Dolphins in Tyler Huntley's first start. He was on the team for like 3 days. Joe Flacco last week. So we're talking about their last 3 games being against backup quarterbacks. They got a rookie debut and Aaron Rodgers in the Jets in week 2. I mean, I don't love diminishing the results of football teams, but come on, I think that's pretty telling. And even the Titans people, I've talked to several different Titans people this week and try to get their vibe on this team, and every one of them said, yeah, look, they're not that good on defense. And so I appreciate the honesty, and I think there is something to that schedule. Let's talk about the personnel here, and they've got some injuries, folks, so it's going to be tough to know exactly who's going to go, so I'll kind of talk about it through that lens. Their edge rushers, Harold Landry, their best one, good player, second-round pick a few years ago, has been, I would say, an above-average NFL edge rusher in terms of really the pass rush. Not necessarily a good edge setter or run defender, but a really speedy, bursty, bendy type pass rusher. And his running mate is Arden Key, who's really developed into a solid player. So I think they've got a quality starter on Landry. I think they have a sufficient level starter in Arden Key, and they play a ton of snaps. I think their next guy in terms of snaps is Jalen Harrell, 7th-round rookie who's played less than 100 snaps in 5 games. Their defensive line, their defensive tackles, Jeffrey Simmons, the main name here, he's one of the premier defensive tackles in the league. I mean, he's a special player, very disruptive, athletic, good technique, powerful. I mean, he's a stud, absolute stud, one of the better defensive tackles in the NFL. So the Bills will have their hands full with him. They've also got a good-looking young rookie here, Tavondre Sweat. Was a high second-round pick out of Texas. Massive. I mean, just a big, sloppy-looking dude, but boy, he is stout. He's really stout. He doesn't give you much as a pass rusher, but his ability to defend the run and reset the line of scrimmage and really just kind of dispose of blockers. I mean, really strong stuff. He's a good-looking young rookie. And then Sebastian Joseph Day is their other, starter there, who's a long-time player, kind of a rotational player in my mind. Run stuffer, can play like the 5 technique, can play a little nose tackle. Decent player, but I think more a guy that you'd love to be kind of off the bench. And then their depth players, again, this is another situation where they don't rotate as much as like the Bills do. Like James Lynch and Keon Coleman. We'll see what Coleman can do. He might not be able to play. Lynch, young player, started his career with the Vikings, had some injuries, hasn't really been impressive. And then Keon Coleman was a late round pick, I think, of the Chiefs in 2023, and he's already kind of bounced around a little bit. So not a lot of depth there. Their linebackers are Kenneth Murray and Ernest Jones. They signed Kenneth Murray in free agency, and I think he's an underwhelming player. I have him as a replacement level starter. Very poor in coverage. You can really take advantage of him. He's got some athleticism and some physicality about him, but not a strong processor and very poor in coverage. They traded for Ernest Jones, who's a good player, a downhill player. Think like Tyrell Dotson type guy. And the same types of limitations where, hey, he can defend the run, play into the line of scrimmage, but not a guy that's really going to help you in coverage or play in space. So a couple guys that are physical and can play downhill, but Murray's processing is a mess, and neither are strong players in coverage. Their corners, they traded for L'Jarius Sneed from the Chiefs, who during his time in Kansas City, one of the best corners in the league. He is off to a dreadful start in Tennessee, just not playing good football. Teams are taking advantage of him. He's given up a lot of separation. He got worked against against the Colts last week. And so, look, I know that we've seen him be a really high-level performer. It's not been the case so far in Tennessee. His running mate is Jarvis Brownlee, and I like Brownlee a lot. He's a rookie, was one of my favorite prospects coming out, and he's quickly gotten playing time. Chidobe Awuzie is a guy that they signed in free agency. He, I guess, would be their preferred starter. He's on injured reserve, but Brownlee's come in and he's a very competitive player. I think he'll be a good starter in the league. I think that's going to be a good draft pick, but he's still a rookie. Now, here's the thing about Sneed and Brownlee. They're outside corners. I don't know if they're going to play. They haven't practiced. I'm recording this on Thursday night. They didn't practice on Wednesday or Thursday. I don't know what their status is going to be. And if they can't go, their depth players are Trey Avery and Darrell Baker, and I think those are replacement-level depth players. So if there's a world where Avery and Baker are their starting outside corners and it's not Sneed and Brownlee, yikes for them. Got a good player in the slot, Roger McCreary, recent draft pick out of Auburn. I think he's developing into one of the better slot corners in all of football. They got a good safety tandem in Quandre Diggs and Amani Hooker. Diggs, you know him probably from his time with Seattle or maybe Detroit. Good quality starting NFL safety, has really nice ball skills, versatile player. And then Amani Hooker's draft pick of theirs that they've developed and has turned into a good starter as well. So nice pair of starting safeties, good slot corner. In theory, good outside corners are not playing well. They might not be available. Burly linebackers that can't play in space. Decent edge rusher, a couple good defensive tackles. We'll see here. And again, availability here is going to be an issue. Tavondre Sweat also really hasn't practiced this week. He might not be able to go. So a lot of things to pay attention to for Tennessee when it comes to injuries. So what are my keys for the Bills on offense against this defense is, number one, test these corners. Like, respectfully, even if Sneed and Brownlee are available, they'll be banged up and they've not played well. And if Avery and Baker are in there, boy, you better go after these guys. Welcome to the party, Amari Cooper. Let's go, right? Like, get some matchups in there and see if you can get some targets and some game experience together. So test these corners. Number two is be ready for a physical front. Simmons, Sweat, Murray, Jones, Sebastian Joseph Day. These are all physical players that are stout, and you can't take anything for granted. Their metrics are good defensively, and I think they've got some good run stuffers that can play downhill and defend the run. So it's going to be a physical situation there, you would think. And then number three, I think this is probably most important. You got to challenge these linebackers to run and cover. Neither Jones or Murray can really play in space or cover. Misdirection. This is a great opportunity if you want to get those rail routes going with your running backs. You get ISO'd up on a linebacker, Kincaid, Knox, they should kill those guys in coverage. So you can really kind of, in my opinion, attack those linebackers and expose that weakness. I think bad linebackers in terms of coverage and space ability, offenses should be able to exploit that in a big way. And that's why you've seen the Bills really adopt the style of defense that they do with two matchup style linebackers, because it's too easy to manipulate burly linebackers. And that's what Tennessee has. You got to take advantage of that. Special teams real quick. Their kicker is outstanding. Nick Folk. He's older. He's 39 years old. He's perfect this year, 8 of 8, including 3 of 3 from beyond 50 yards. Longtime NFL kicker. He's been excellent throughout his entire career. In fact, he's 93% better in 4 of the last 5 years. And I thought this was interesting studying him today, is that his extra point percentage has actually been lower than his field goal percentage in 2023, 2021, and 2020. Very good kicker. He gets a touchback, only 24% of his kickoffs are returned, 23rd in terms of frequency. So they're not really too interested in covering kickoffs. They got a good young punter in Ryan Stonehouse, very talented, big time leg. I saw him at the Shrine game a few years ago, and I thought he was really outstanding. His EPA so far this year is middle of the pack, but very talented punter. Their return guy is a rookie, Jaquan Jackson, a rookie out of Tulane, 5'11", 185 pounds, 4.42 speed. Wasn't an overly good kick returner in college, has been okay so far in the NFL, and that's the guy that you got to deal with on punt and kick return. So there you have it. Bills-Titans. I mean, the Bills are heavy favorites in this game. They should be. They're at home. I have high expectations for the Bills in this football game. But, look, I'm old enough to remember the Bills losing to Mac Jones and the Patriots last year and losing to the Jets last year with Zach Wilson and losing to Denver last year. They lost to the Urban Meyer Jaguars in 2022. The Bills should handle their business pretty convincingly, but it's the NFL. There's a path for any team, and you better take it seriously because this team probably can run the ball. They, metrically a very good defense, and if you don't play good football and this thing's close and that team believes they can win, a desperate team that's 1-4 and this quarterback, a lot of doubt on him, pretty talented in terms of physical tools. Don't take anything for granted. Go get this dub and get to 5-2. All right, folks, that's it for today on the podcast. We still have one more episode for you where I'll give you my final thoughts, and we'll talk about the Bills signing a player to their practice squad, a kicker, in addition to some of the other news, some of my thoughts on what Amari Cooper can do in this game. Injury reports, interesting. We'll talk about that with Dr. Kyle Trimble, and, of course, my 5 predictions for Sunday. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills! And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.